Hello, this is Schizophrenia Matters, and today I'd like to talk about the 5 negative symptoms of schizophrenia. The 5 negative symptoms of schizophrenia are asociality, avolition, anhedonia, affective flattening, and alogia. And asociality is reduced social interaction, withdrawal, and lack of interest in relationships. Avolition is the lack of motivation, drive, and initiative in goal-directed activities. Anhedonia is the inability to experience pleasure or enjoyment from activities previously found rewarding. Affective flattening is a reduced emotional expression showing little or no emotion and a monotone voice. Alogia is a poverty of speech and reduced quantity of content of spoken words and difficulty communicating thoughts and feelings. I would like to say that I have schizophrenia, and I would like to go through each one of these things, each one of these symptoms, and how they affect my life today. I feel like the negative symptoms of schizophrenia are often overlooked and can be quite severe, especially when it comes to recovery. And if you're in a residual phase of schizophrenia, you're most often affected by these types of negative symptoms, and it makes restarting your life very difficult after a psychotic break with schizophrenia. So in asociality, this is the reduced social interaction, withdrawal, and lack of interest in relationships. For example, I haven't left my apartment very much. You know, like I'm just, it's been about 3 months since my last psychotic break, and it's taken me this long to even start to try to want to interact with the world. I felt like, it's taken me this long to get over a lot of even the delusions that I was still having. And I do still have breakthrough symptoms of hallucinations. However, they're much more manageable today, and they are they usually happen only around like sleeping time. Usually it's kind of when I'm in like a dream state that I start having hallucinations again, and I'll wake up and I'll start having hallucinations. Those are more breakthrough symptoms, and not really typical of my day-to-day symptoms of my day-to-day life. What is typical of my day-to-day life are the negative symptoms of schizophrenia. That social withdrawal is hard to get over, especially since I've had problems with people and in community in the past, by nature of my psychotic breaks. So it makes bridging that gap a little bit difficult. So the avolition and lack of motivation is another key component of the negative symptoms of schizophrenia. It's so difficult to want to find a job, because I don't want to have another psychotic break while I'm working, and this is the excuse that I use to justify my not wanting to look for a job, and but also in the same right, like, it's a part of my disease, and there's some parts of it are justified that, you know, like it can be dangerous, but you know, I still need to make money. I still need to go out and eventually find a job. I'm taking this year to open myself up to regrow what I have lost in my last psychotic break. But you know, I should be working on getting work here in the next year. So you know, I've given myself this time to reconvene, to find a little bit more healing from my last psychotic break, because it was so extreme, and I've needed this amount of time just to even come back to an ability to be sane, truly. So you know, it's a work in progress. There's no way that I could have worked in the past 3 months. I'm still in the way. I can envision myself working, but not soon. You know, like in the next 6 months. You know, maybe. Anhedonia. It's when you basically have things that you gain reward from, you gain pleasure from, become no longer pleasurable. For example, I like to ride my bicycle. I used to mountain bike, and I can no longer really do that anymore. Like it's one of those things that I don't get much pleasure from anymore. You know, like I used to be outside a lot. I used to go for hikes and really enjoy going out, and you know, and despite the problems that I had with the community, I would go out into the community, and you know, and I would enjoy going to going to see local art, or going to see local musicians or anything like that. And I just, it's hard for me to get out, to be motivated to go out and to go do those things, because they're not quite as, they don't have that same type of fun anymore. You know, it's very difficult to motivate yourself to do the things that you want to do if you can't even do the things you need to do, is the way I want to put it. You know, with like, with the abolition, it's like, how can I motivate myself to go and have fun, when I can't even I can't even motivate myself to get a job, or vice versa. I can't even motivate myself to have fun, so why can't I, why would I motivate myself to get a job? And so it's a trap and the more that I become aware of how I'm trapping myself, the more that I can try to figure out a way of freeing myself from that. But it takes time, it takes a little bit of time, it takes a lot of effort, because my thoughts are still sporadic. They still hurt. I still have a lot of sharp-edged thoughts that, just forgive my metaphors there, but my thoughts, they hurt. They hurt me. Anyway, there's an effective flattening. That's basically when you just makes everything, makes your whole, it's a lack of emotion. It's a lack of you're not too high or not too low. You're kind of in the middle, but it's kind of like a purgatory instead of anomia. It's not as nice as you would really want it to be, and so it's a place where you would think that you would be in a good spot, you know, like you're not like in a manic state or you're not in a depressive state. Um, you're kind of right in the middle, but it feels a little bit monotone, and you can't really get out of that, and you feel monotone in your emotions, and it's like it's definitely a poverty of emotion, you know, like it's not what you think, you know, like it is what you think, but it is not what you think. It's definitely, you know, like you go through and it is flatline, and I have trouble right now, like even getting, you know, just that right there is about as emotion as I get these days, if I'm not like symptomatic. I also have been diagnosed with bipolar type 1. So I do have that emotional component where I will go from high to low and low to high very rapidly, and you know, I'll have I'll have bad emotional responses. However, the schizophrenia is kind of overrides that, at least in my experience, while I'm medicated. If I'm not medicated, that experience seems to like ratchet up everything to the highest degree, and it's like being like the Joker. Truly is, because you can't stop laughing and you're in just absolute paranoid schizophrenic delusions, and you're violent. That's in an active phase. Alogia is a poverty of speech. You're doing it right now. Like it's a constant search for words, the appropriate word. Sometimes I make mistakes in the appropriate word, but I'm getting better at it. I'm getting more efficient at picking out the correct words. I am using the necessary words to convey sufficient meaning. However, or meaning sufficiently. I do make mistakes, but I am improving in that regard. And as I get further and further away from my last psychotic break, my ability to use my words, to find my words efficiently, is improving. Because my sentences used to be very flowery. They would be very during active psychosis or active schizophrenia phase. My language would just be very, very disorganized. The lollipops are red today, and Jupiter is rising, kind of thing. Like it would be very hard to pinpoint like exactly what I was talking about. That disorganized speech was so bad. But then I also had, I would also like kind of shift in and out of that. That was probably my least expressive trait during active phase schizophrenia. Delusions were my most active trait during active schizophrenia, and hallucinations were my second most. So I don't know how that works for everybody, but I mean, I had, but the delusions, when I would be in those delusions, it would be very intense. It would be like a whole nother world. I'd be disassociated into that delusional world only. and would have multiple delusions back to back, that were stacked on top of each other, that were just made completely no sense. It's disorganized thinking. But the residual phase is tough to live with as well. It's not quite as extreme as active phase schizophrenia is. It's not as intense, but it's that slow burn. Can you overcome these day-to-day negative symptoms, these things that your disease is trying to take away from you? And can you recover them? Can you claw them back? Can you hold on to the things that you have felt pleasure from? Can you still be comfortable? It's a difficult challenge on the day-to-day basis. But I'm going to wrap this up here, and I hope this gave you a little bit more information on the negative symptoms of schizophrenia and how they differentiate from positive symptoms from and cognitive symptoms from schizophrenia. Thank you.